Hello, and welcome to the Amongst Romance podcast, your window to everything Italy from an outsider's perspective. Join us each week as we navigate the Italian way of life and all the adventures that come along with it. I know that Italy is a popular tourist destination, but you know who really likes Italy?
Who's that?
James Bond.
Yes.
When you think about it, there's been quite a few of James Bond movies that take place in Italy, and it really seems like 007 just can't stay away. Interestingly enough, I wrote a blog post about this a while ago, and it's a very popular post. So I thought it would be a fun episode to do because we can also talk about the different locations, because I think you and I have been to most of them in Italy. And if someone's looking to add a bit of, a theme to their vacation, or they're a huge James Bond fan, then this is a fun way to give your trip a nice theme.
Yeah, no, I agree. It seems like every Bond movie has some sort of cool scene that's based in some awesome area in Italy. It's kind of cool to be able to actually visit some of these places. And I think we pretty much have visited all of these locations that showed up in the James Bond movies.
Yeah, so I know you and I watch James Bond movies quite a bit, especially during the holidays. They would have like a James Bond marathon and they'll just play over and over. I can't say we've seen all of them, especially like the older ones, but I think we've seen all of the ones that are taking place in Italy, especially the newer ones with Daniel Craig. So I think they'll be very memorable in our minds.
And so surprisingly, of all the Bond movies, only three of the actors that have played Bond actually, ended up having scenes in Italy. The first one, obviously, is Sean Connery. Then Roger Moore, which is, my favorite out of the bunch. And then Daniel Craig.
I think Daniel Craig probably has been to Italy the most because 4 of his movies, they have scenes in Italy, or maybe just because it's a bit more recent. But I thought they would have James Bond in Italy a bit more. So I'm a bit surprised that there isn't as much as it could be. Nonetheless, they're really fun places to explore.
Yeah, I think of all the locations in Italy, the one most visited for shoots has been Venice. Venice doesn't need any introduction. It's a gorgeous city. Plenty of cool chase scenes and spy versus spy chases that occur are usually based in Venice, right? In the canals or those cool side streets in the center of the city.
I think Venice is made for sort of mystery and intrigue. And there were 3 James Bond movies. The first one was From Russia with Love in 1963 with Sean Connery. Then it was Moonraker with Roger Moore in 1979, and then we had Casino Royale in 2006. So it seems that Venice really does attract James Bond, even if he's not really here for the sights.
Yeah, I think one of the coolest chases they've ever had was in the canals with all those gondolas and speedboats thrown into the mix. It was pretty elaborate in one of the, I think it was one of the Roger Moore one that was in Venice.
Yeah, because I think they are in the boat and they go under the Bridge of Sighs. So I think that particular scene was actually filmed in a studio, but still, it's Venice, right? So it's also the 60s, so I think it's kind of forgivable. And I remember in Casino Royale where they're in the casino, and do you remember when they have that scene when the building collapses? That was a bit like, oh my God, such a beautiful building, but obviously that was not a real thing.
That would have been little too elaborate for it to happen in Venice. I don't think there's any buildings that they could have spared to destroy underwater. But yeah, it was pretty realistic. And obviously all the scenes leading up to that point were in Venice itself.
So now let's talk about if somebody wants to come to Venice for a James Bond experience. Let's talk about some ideas. I would not come in the summertime. If you're coming during the tourist season, it's hot, and I don't think that's a perfect time for that. You're not going to have the James Bond experience. What I would recommend is come off season. So for example, when the carnival is happening, end of January, beginning of February, you come to Venice for the Venice Carnival. Everybody has masks. There is a lot of activity happening around it. You have the whole world of mystery, of intrigue. And I think that gives it a bit more of an authentic experience. Plus, James Bond always is very fancy. He goes to casinos, and there is a casino in Venice, which is one of the oldest gaming establishments in the world. It was established in 1638. So if you really want to have an elevated James Bond vibe, I would say go to the casino. The interesting part about it is that they do have a dress code. So if you're thinking casino in the sense of like Vegas, this is not it. It's not as flashy. It's smaller. It's not open all night, all day. And like I said, it also has a dress code. If you are not dressed properly, you will not be able to go inside.
There's also a couple more locations that were super popular in the movie. In Moonraker, there's the Hotel Danieli, which is probably the most luxurious hotel in Venice. You can book a stay, expect to pay quite a bit for it, but it may be worth, or at least visiting the location just to experience that scene in the movie.
Yes, and there's another palazzo that was also in Moonraker, and now it's a museum. I'm not sure how to pronounce it.
It's Carazzonica.
Yeah, that one. That's also a place that appears in the James Bond movies. If you're looking for that old school, sort of old world vibe and sophistication, that is definitely a place to check out. It's a museum now, so you can definitely go inside. So now let's go to another location, which, if we're talking about Casino Royale, we can segue from Venice to Lake Como. I'm actually surprised that Bond didn't make more appearances in Lake Como, since it's such a beautiful location, but also it's known to attract very wealthy and sort of famous people there. I kind of thought, there'll be more scenes where Bond goes there, not just the one in Casino Royale.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised also, since it's such a gorgeous location. If you've never visited Lake Como, it's truly something to experience. When I first saw it, I was actually in awe. The way the lake is situated and the surrounding mountains, it's unreal. So I can see how a lot of the rich actors and actresses have places there. In Casino Royale, you'll see that's one of the scenes where Bond ends up relaxing in one of the villas.
Yeah, and I think you can actually visit the villa. It's called Villa del Balbianello. It's a setting when he's recovering from being shot, or he shoots Mr. White. There's a confrontation there. So if you are going to Como, there is a lot of things to do. And if you're looking for more Como inspiration, I recommend listening to our episode where I interviewed Nikki, who lives in Como, and she gave us some really great tips. So if you're looking to, go and chase James Bond dreams in Lake Como, I think you'll love that one.
Now, the next area is a very popular scene in one of James Bond's series of movies. It's based in Cortina d'Ampezzo, For Your Eyes Only. Everyone remembers that skiing scene where they're flying down the mountain in the snow with their white suits and get-ups, and everyone's getting shot left, right, and center. It's one of those scenes that you can't forget. And yeah, it's based in this beautiful location. It was home to the 1956 Winter Games and the destination for the 2026 Winter Olympics. It's definitely a very popular resort area.
I like how they have this beautiful resort town. As you said, everybody's kind of like, skiing and relaxing, watching the stores, and he's just like there to destroy everything. There's a scene where like he goes through some lady's window and basically just crashes everything, and they're just like, oh, sorry, and then just move on. And again, he's not here to see the sights. He's not here to appreciate the scenery. He's just here to catch the bad guys. Typical man on a business trip, right?
Yeah. Well, I think the Roger Moore series of movies were always action-packed with those funny scenes. I like that mix of the two.
So now, if you're coming to Cortina, and whether it's for the Olympics or just another time, the scenes that were filmed, it's the hotel there. It's called Miramonte Majestic Grand Hotel. Now, I looked some info about this. So he stayed in room 300, but the balcony we see is from room 108. They don't really advertise this. I went on their website. You can book a room, but they don't really have anything about like the James Bond experience, which I think is missed opportunity, really, because they could have really, spruced it up and really marketed that, but they are not doing that. So I couldn't find any mention of 007 on their website. So maybe they're just kind of like playing it low.
Yeah, I guess they're popular enough as is, so they don't need fanboys and girls visiting the resort.
So the next location, let's go to Lake Garda. Now, Lake Garda is in Quantum of Solace, and I actually found this one to be kind of boring, except for the scenery. So when we were in Lake Garda, I remember driving through the tunnel that they have in the scene. You see him kind of going through the tunnel, and the scenery is really great. And then he ends up in this marble quarry. And I remember thinking, where is that? Because it's not when you drive through the tunnel, because you're driving kind of along the coast. So what they did is they filmed it in a different location. The quarry is actually in Tuscany, which is about 5 hours away. He starts in Lake Garda, and then he goes to this tunnel and comes out in this location, which in reality is about 5 hours away.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's what they do. They meld more than one location for the same scene. But I think there's a classic car chase that happens in that tunnel too, so it's pretty cool.
Now, let's talk about Lake Garda itself. When you and I were there, it was spring, so it wasn't too busy yet. We both loved it. It's such a beautiful area. I just really fell in love with it. Lake Garda is surrounded by all these beautiful towns. And what surprised me the most was just how many tropical trees they had. They had so many lemon trees and orange trees. And I thought, how is that? You see that in the Amalfi Coast. I did not expect to see it in Lake Garda, but anyway, there it was. So just added to the appeal. And Lake Garda has so many beautiful towns that if you're looking for a different experience, maybe you don't want to go Lake Como, I would say Lake Garda is a great choice.
Yeah, I would agree. It did seem like the area was very tropical almost, right? And I was surprised how warm the weather at that time was. And yeah, it's got a great boardwalk, beautiful scenery, and of course, great food. So I'd recommend going.
So then in the same movie, he moves on to Siena. Now, this is such an interesting scene because Siena is a very well-known town, right? When we were there, it was packed with tourists. It's a beautiful location. In the movie, he arrives in Siena when the horse race is happening, the Palio di Siena. So, there's tons of people there. It's a big event. There's lots of activity. And he's not there to appreciate the sights and the event. He just happens to chase these bad guys across like the historic rooftops. So all you see him is just like running across and all these tiles flying all over the place. Like, he does not care about what's happening around him. And I just thought that was kind of ironic.
Yeah, I always find it pretty cool that a lot of the scenes occur during some special events. The Siena horse race is actually really cool. I think that adds to the James Bond mystique and action scenes.
Now, if you're coming to Siena, and I think you should because it's a very beautiful town. It's a small town, but it's very pretty. I liked our time there. I thought it was beautiful. If you're coming to Siena and you want to experience the horse race, it happens twice a year, usually in July and August. If you want to go see that, plan your trip around it. Otherwise, I would suggest come maybe like in the fall or early spring, even like in winter. Now probably be a good time because you get to avoid the crowds. And again, it's not as hot because it gets quite hot in the summertime. But again, Siena is a beautiful town. And if you're coming here, why would you not want to do the horse race? I think we should go back one time during that time because I'd love to see it. It looks pretty incredible.
Yeah, I think the horse experiencing that horse race is actually something you have to do once in your life.
All right, so now let's go further south to Matera. We've been to Matera a couple of times now, and I think the James Bond movie that was filmed here, the last one, No Time to Die, introduced a lot of people to the area, which, again, maybe were not aware of what Matera is and where it is. And I think, when you look at how much they spend in tourist attraction videos, I think that one James Bond movie probably did more for the city than all kinds of videos could have done.
Yeah, I would agree because, Matera was really never on anyone's list of places to visit. People heard of it, but they've never really experienced the area. Now, Matera is actually a UNESCO World Heritage Site. There is actually the complex network of cave dwellings in the mountainside, and those are known as the Sassi. Up until early to mid 1900s, they were still living in those caves. It was actually known as the shame of Italy because of that, people living in caves still. When you look at the remnants, you can actually see they look like normal, almost medieval homes in some areas. That was pretty interesting to see. But yeah, Matera is actually a gorgeous city. And I think the movie actually shone some light that needed to be shone on it.
Now, in that movie, if you haven't seen it or if you have seen the commercial, there's a scene where he's being chased across this bridge and he jumps off the bridge. So this is actually not filmed in Matera. It's another one of those, they piece scenes together. There's another city that's not too far from Matera. It's called Gravina in Puglia. This one's actually in Puglia, whereas Matera is in Basilicata, but they're very close together. We actually stayed in Gravina in Puglia. I think it was maybe not last January, the January before. So we went to Gravina in Puglia and Matera, and we went there in January. So we were able to see both places at the same time. And they are very similar. You can see how the bridge fits in with the Matera vibe. If you go to Gravina in Puglia, it's very prominent and it's pretty cool to see.
The two towns or cities are actually very similar. And I think if you plan on visiting the area for a little while, staying in Gravina might be a more affordable option because Matera is actually very close by. So if you have a car, it won't take you very long to get there since it's 25 kilometers.
Now, I think if you are going to Matera, I would suggest staying either in Matera or Gravina in Puglia, or you can do both. In the movie, there's a scene where they go to this really beautiful restaurant and it's at night, and there are so many nice hotels that, they are in the former dwellings and build-up houses. If you're looking for that elevated James Bond luxurious experience, I really recommend staying in one of those because that will give you that vibe. Like, it's also very cool to stay in one of those. I think we've been there. I forget what the first time we went. I think it was during summer, but the second time it was January and it was gorgeous. The weather was beautiful. I think it was like almost 20 degrees on one day. So it's sunny because it's further down south. It's not as crowded and the views are spectacular. So you not just see Matera itself, but there's like I don't know if it's a canyon, but there's a big drop where you can actually climb across to a viewpoint, which is also very beautiful. Now, we did another episode about Matera, so if you want to hear more about Matera and how much we loved it, I encourage you to go and check that one out as well.
Now, the next location doesn't need much of an introduction. It is my favorite place in Italy, and that's Rome. Here, they actually filmed Spectre, where they had the famous car chase scene where, Bond is racing against Dave Bautista, the wrestler. And they're flying through, some interesting locations like the center of Rome, the Tiber River, and then flying through the beautiful Piazza Navona and destroying some steps along the way. But yeah, this is actually, my favorite locations that they shot for this movie.
I'm actually surprised that they only had one movie and one part of the movie happening in Rome. Because when you think about it, Rome is the perfect setting, sort of like Venice. It's the perfect setting for secret societies and all kinds of mischievous things. And they do have some of that. I think for Spectre, this is actually a good location. I just kind of expected it to be, I don't know, a bit more. Because, spies and, it did wonders for Dan Brown. So I thought they would have had more frequent visits to Rome from Bond because everywhere else seems to be coming to Rome. When you look at the Mission Impossible movies and all that, I'm very disappointed that they only have one movie out of all the Bond movies that happens in Rome.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised also, considering it's Rome, right? Well, you would expect every movie visiting Rome for one reason or another, but I guess it's difficult to shoot a lot of the type of scenes that are common with the James Bond movies, but I'm glad they managed to do it with Spectre.
I love how he is in Rome, and most people come to Rome, they marvel at what's happening, they take pictures, there's so many crowds. Whenever James Bond rolls in, the streets are empty, there's nobody outside, even in the middle of the night, and they have all these car chases, there's no one really around, there's no tourists. He does not care about the sights. He does not want to see anything. He's just flying through by the seat of his pants, in and out. And that's it. That's his whole Rome experience.
Now, we did have an episode of the podcast, Rome for first timers. So, if you want to get more acquainted with visiting Rome, I would go back and have a listen to that.
Now, the last location, and it's from The Spy Who Loved Me in 1977, and that's Sardinia. We talked about James Bond coming to Italy and sort of just chasing things around and not really taking any downtime. In The Spy Who Loved Me, at the end of the movie, he does end up on the beach with the sexy Russian agent, and they are on the north coast of Sardinia. Now, we've been to Sardinia, and it's such a beautiful location. I think it's perfectly suited for the ending of a movie, right? He's not there just chased to the beach and whatever. So if you're looking for a more relaxed ending to your James Bond adventure, I think Sardinia is a good place for that.
The scene was actually, looked like a remote area by the coast of the island, but it hasn't changed a whole lot since then. You still get that beautiful, lush beach area that you can visit. So I'd highly recommend visiting Sardinia.
Sardinia is known as a beach destination. They have beautiful coasts. I would probably end the trip here or maybe even start it because it's such a relaxing and enjoyable atmosphere. This is the place to rent a car and drive along the coast and admire the coastline. The hotel that they stayed at, which is the Hotel Cala di Volpe, and it's on the Costa Smeralda area of Sardinia. Now, the hotel does offer an Aston Martin test drive experience. I think it's only limited during summertime. But again, if you're looking for that whole James Bond experience, this is something to consider if you're coming to Sardinia. If not, just enjoy the beach life. Maybe go for a boat ride or an afternoon lunch on the boat. You can always pretend you're there as a part of the, secret agent experience. And I think you'll enjoy it nonetheless.
Yeah, the beach stay in Sardinia is definitely the way I'd want to end my trip to Italy.
Now, if we were talking about your favorite James Bond location from the movie, which one do you think would be your favorite?
It's kind of a tie between the Rome scenes and Matera, right? I really liked both quite a bit. And of course, Rome was Rome. So I enjoy anything related to that beautiful city. But I think those two scenes are probably my favorites of all the Bond movies.
I think I will agree with you on Matera because they did an incredible job with that. They really make it magical. But I think I'm going to go with Venice as my second one. As much as I love Rome as well, I don't think the scenes that they shot are as good as the experience that he has in Venice. Plus, he's been to Venice 3 times now, and I don't think you can beat the palazzos and all those beautiful canals and stuff. So I think for me, the best scenes were Matera and Venice.
I guess there's no real wrong answer when it comes to a Bond scene in Italy. So, I'd pick those places too if Rome wasn't involved.
So this was an interesting way to tackle an itinerary. It's not exactly an itinerary, just some ideas to give you for making your Italian adventure a bit different. I'm going to leave the link to the post I did on this and the show notes, as well as a few other suggestions. I would recommend you check out some other episodes of the podcast. We did one on Venice. We did one on Matera. We did some on Rome as well, which I think will be useful. Next time you come to Italy, consider doing a bit of a theme vacation.
And of course, you can't go wrong with a theme based on a Bond movie, so enjoy.